All right, everybody, this is the last part of this sound envelope object lesson that I'm doing here. So the first lesson showed you just how to use an envelope, what an envelope is as far as making sound. Again, it's a way to sort of make more naturally occurring sound synthesis where the sound kind of begins and ends on its own without us necessarily stopping and starting it using attack, decay, sustain, and release. Then in the last video I showed you to how I could change the type of oscillator I'm using, the triangle, sawtooth, square, and sine. So each one of those is controlled with a key press, as well as the frequency will be changed for each one. So just to run this again, I have this other camera now so you can see the key presses. So A, S, D, F, so triangle, sawtooth, square, sine. Okay. Now in the last video I showed you too that my idea is I want to use this as inspiration, this Chrome Music Lab sketch. So I like these little characters here and the colors and the shapes. Okay, so there's a little bit about the type. So square wave, if we were to look at the visual representation, it does in fact look like a square. Okay, same with a sawtooth. So sawtooth, the wave goes up and then drops down. It goes up and then drops down. Triangle goes up and then down, sort of very much like a triangle. And then a sine wave is sort of like the regular sound wave we talked about that curves as we go up and down. So that's where those sounds get their name. So I'm going to use these shapes and colors as sort of the inspiration for the visuals I'm going to add. Okay, so first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the background out of draw and I'm going to put it into setup, because my idea is that I'm going to have shapes just appear randomly on the canvas and I want them to stay there as I go through this. So I don't want draw, because draw is just going to copy over them with the background every time it loops through. So my idea is I'm going to make each shape appear randomly on the screen. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to use the random function that we learned in a previous lesson. Okay, but I want to just make a random variable instead of randomly assigning it to my ellipse, which I'll do in a moment. So I'm going to, inside this key press, every time I press key, no matter what key it is, it's going to play the envelope, and then it's going to create, I'm going to make a variable called x, and I'm going to make it random. And this is going to be the x position of every shape I do. And so it's going to be between 0 and the width. So remember the random function, if I only put one argument, it will assume the minimum value is 0 and the maximum value is width. So it's going to pick a random number between 0 and the width of the canvas, which I have set at 400. Okay, and then I am going to do the same thing for the y-axis. So I'm going to create another variable called y, and I'm going to do that between 0 and height. So every time I press the key, it's going to play the envelope, and it's going to create a variable called x with a random value between width and 0 and width, and y a random value between 0 and height. And every time I press the key, it will give me a new random value for that variable. So I'm now going to go down here into, I'm going to start with my sine wave because it's going to make a circle, and that's sort of the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to write ellipse. Okay, open, close, parentheses. So ellipse, I'm going to give the x value is going to be, the x position is just going to be x, whatever that random value is that I get when I press the key. And then I'm also going to do the y value is going to be random between width and height. So y will always take on that. And then the size, I'm going to set at, let's say, 25. Okay, so if I press play, I click here. So now I'm going to press F because that's the key that goes with that. I press F and it makes a circle. I press F again and another circle in a different place, a random place. I didn't know where that was going to be. So I can just keep pressing. It's just going to keep making these random circles. The reason they stay on the canvas is because I put the background in setup instead of draw. I'm actually, for this project, not even going to use draw. So I have that. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is just give it a fill. Okay, and I'm going to go back and look at the sine wave here. So that's kind of a light blue. I'm not going to go crazy figuring out what exactly that shade is, but I know it's going to be like 0. Let me give it just a little bit of green and mostly blue, and let's see if that works out the way I want it to. Oop, that was A, so that's why I didn't see anything. I press A. I haven't done anything with that yet, but here's F. Okay, there we go. Maybe I could just lighten that up, maybe like 100. Let's see what that does. That's fine, I'm okay with that, okay? One last thing I wanna do actually is I don't want an outline on any of my shapes, so I'm gonna go into setup and just write no capital S stroke. Okay, I'm just gonna do that in setup because that will, any shape I do will not have a stroke, so that saves me having to write it over and over and over with that. So I'll run it one more time. There, it comes out, so I get my blue circle without that. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a square that is going to do relatively the same thing. So I can use my X and Y here, so I'm gonna write rect. Okay, I believe there is a square function. I have not, I'm sort of a bit more old-fashioned with p5.js, so you could use the square. Well, you know, let's check this out. Let me go into references real quick. We'll go to shape, and let's see, indeed there is a square, and it looks like it works very much like ellipse. So let's use that, why not? Okay, it's square wave, so I'm gonna do, instead of rect, I'll do squares. Okay, so it's gonna be at X and Y, and then I'm gonna make this bigger. I'm gonna make this at 50. So my idea is the higher the pitch, the smaller the shape is gonna be. So as this pitch gets lower, I'll make the shapes bigger, all right? Now one thing I'm also gonna change here is if I go, I'm gonna go into setup and type rect mode center. Oops, center. Okay, so usually when you make a rectangle or a square, we can even check the reference here, draws location, ooh, round curve. Oh, okay, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. But by default, the first two parameters set the location upper left-hand corner, okay? So that means if I make a rectangle, if it started here, it would sort of create a box there. But I want my rectangles to actually start from the center, okay? So if I change rect mode center in setup, that will allow me to, whatever I give X and Y, it's going to be the center of the square as opposed to the upper left-hand corner, okay? And I'm going to do the fill now. So if I go in here, find that square wave, so it's kind of a green. So I'm going to make the fill 0 red. I'll go 255 for green, and maybe give it like 80 of blue if that darkens it up a little bit. So now let's try, press F. Now I press D, and I get my squares there. Okay. All right, so now here's where things are gonna get a little trickier. Sawtooth, okay? So Sawtooth, I'm gonna make a right triangle, okay? So there's no command to do a right triangle. I'm gonna write triangle, okay? And if you remember triangle takes 6 values. I'll go back to the reference here just so we can see. So I go to triangle, remember triangle has 6 values, and the X and Y are the first point, X and Y are the second point, X and Y are the third point. Now this is where it gets a little tricky, because if everything is related to this random, I don't want all the points on my triangle to be random. I just want to create one point and then have all the other points sort of connected to that random spot, so it always comes out looking the same way. So I'm going to start X and Y as the first point on my triangle, and I'm envisioning that to be sort of the top point on my triangle, and then it's going to come down and then go out like this and then come back. Okay, so with that said, I have X and Y here. So my next one is going to be, if it's going down, it's the same X position. Okay. Oh, so I pressed a key there, sorry. So let me stop this so I don't make that mistake again. So I'm going to do X, and then I'm going to do X plus, or no, I'm sorry, I'm going to do Y. Since Y is going to be a little lower on the canvas from that first point, I'm going to do Y plus, and I want this to be 75 by 75. Okay, so I have that. Now my next point is going to be, like I said, if here's the tip, it comes down like this and then it goes back. So that's going to be a little less than whatever the X winds up being. So I'm going to do X minus 75. Okay, so that'll put it out a little to the left of where that top point is. And the Y value is actually going to be the same Y plus 75. This would be easier if I could draw it in front of you, but you'll see what it comes out looking like, okay? So let me just run this now so you can kind of see. So I'm going to press S. So there's my triangle. So that's that first point, X, Y. that second point, the x is the same as far as from here to here and from here to here. The y is further down, so that's why this y is plus 75. The next x is this x but minus 75, which sets it back here, but the y is still the same as the second point here. So from the top, y plus 75, y. So no matter where it goes, the x is the same, and then all the other points are just based off those first two. So let me just check what the color of that. So that's like a yellow, kind of darkish yellow maybe. So let's go fill here, and then I'll do yellow is like 255, 255, 0. So I'm going to do a little, maybe like 230, 230, 0. See if that darkens up that yellow a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll bring this down to like 200. No, it's a little too green. I'm going to go back. That was fine. I'll leave it at that. 230, 230. Okay. Okay, so now I have this square wave. All right, last thing I need to do is I'm going to make another triangle, but this is going to be a equilateral triangle, so all sides. That's a pink one. Okay. So I'm going to do triangle again. I'm going to do x and y. So now I'm going to envision that my triangle, if the top is here, it's actually going to come down this way and then this way. Okay, so my first point is going to be the top tip of that triangle right there, and then it's going to come down. So the second x will be a little more than the first x, the third x will be a little less, and then both y's will be the same distance from the top here. Okay, so I'm going to make this by 100. Okay, so I'm just sort of increasing by 25 each one I go. So x, and since it's 100, I'm going to do half one way, half the other way from the x. So this is going to be plus 50, and then y plus 100. Hey, Ro.
Dada.
Yeah?
Something happened on the TV, and then...
All right, I'll come and fix it in just a minute, okay? All right. So something happened with the TV, so I gotta speed this up here. All right, so then the last one I'm gonna do x minus 50, oop, not a capital, x minus 50, and then y plus 100. Okay, and then I'm gonna do fill. This pink's I'm gonna do 255, 0, and then like 190 for pink. Okay, so now I go in here. Let's see, I press A, and there we go. There's my pink triangle. So now I have, I'll restart it just to clear it. So I press A, I get my pink triangle. S, I get the square wave. All right, so, okay, so there you have it. Now I'm gonna add one last thing here, okay, which we haven't seen before. I'm gonna make a let, I'm gonna call it A. For what's called alpha. Okay, so every fill takes, for RGB, takes red, green, blue. There is an additional argument that you can add, which is called alpha. And alpha is basically the transparency. So we can make shapes that are a bit more transparent, which means that when I do it, if I were to have, like, say, these two shapes, I could still see the entire shape of the square through this triangle, so they don't completely block each other out as they go. So the reason I'm just making this a variable is in case I decide to change it, I only have to change the variable and I have to go through. So now I'm going to press play. I'm going to do it again. So you see it's a little more transparent. It's a little more clear. I'm just going to do it until they start overlapping here. Okay, so there, you see? So now I can see the outline of that square and of that triangle, even though one's on top of the other, so it doesn't block it out. Okay, so there you have it. All right, so this is now my finished product, inspired by this Chrome Music Lab sketch, which I am so fond of. We've added a lot to this. So we've got the envelope, we've got the oscillator, we're changing the oscillator sound, the frequency, we're using random to put random shapes all over the canvas, and we're now adding some alpha to add some transparency to our shapes as well. So you can play around with that, see what you can do with it. You can change frequency, change the shape of the color, you can do whatever you want, but this was just even more so to, again, remember, introduce you to this envelope object that we have. All right, so please do it. Wait to see what you made. Send me an email if you got any questions or want me to look at your code. All right, enjoy. See you next time.